Afternoon, VC Harris here with another video. The favourite records of some of my favourite artists. Not so much an idea, more a cry for help. But I was influenced by this by a couple of things. One, on my Instagram a couple of days ago, being a music nerd, and let's be honest, we're all music nerds, this came up, which I always love this picture. Ian McCulloch, Eno and the Bunnymen, sort of in situ with his record collection. And as a music nerd, and I'm sure everyone's the same, you're looking at his record, there's Talking Heads over there, Velvet Underground's third album, he's listening to Iggy Pop's The Idiot. You kind of, if you're like me, you're kind of obsessed by what people are listening to, like artists that you love, because you think it's part of their DNA. And also, I had one of these 1001 albums that you must hear before you die. And there's a picture of Hendrix here, which, you know, I'm poring over this, because you've got Dylan's Highway 65. There's a Lenny Bruce album. His records are all over the floor. It's just fascinating, and there's some blues record down there as well. And I'm just drawn to these sort of things, like a moth to a flame, like music lists. So I thought I've used. There was a series in the Melody Maker, the weekly music press in England, called Rebellious Jukebox, where they used to get artists to pick their 13 favourite records, singles, whatever, and it was so addictive. And there's also a site on the internet called Far Out, which seems to collate all these lists. And I've sort of cross-referenced them, so they're kosher, I think. I've made sure that the list meant. So basically, I've done a list of some of my favourite artists and some of their favourite ever records. And first up, Kurt Cobain. He's probably the most well-known of these, because I can't remember if it was after he died, but there was a list of Kurt Cobain's 50 favourite records came out, I think when they produced his diaries. A lot of it was what I'd call progressive punk, the sort of punk that was influenced by Public Image Limited. So there'd be like, he had the Wipers in there, he had Flipper, I think he had Fang in there as well. But this was a surprise. R.E.M. by Green, he had this as his 50 favourite records. Now, I suspect, because I do know that Kurt Cobain really admired Michael Stipe, and I think not even so much the music, but as the way he sort of conducted his career, that R.E.M. kind of kept their credibility without totally selling out. Because I know actually I've read a lot of books about Kurt Cobain's death, and I know the last record he ever played was Out of Time by R.E.M. It was on the turntable apparently. I like R.E.M. This tends to get a 3 out of 5, doesn't it, or a 6 out of 10. I really like this. For a lot of people, I reckon this is their first R.E.M. album they ever heard. I think it may have been mine, but I think it's a great album, absolutely fantastic. I've forgotten how good it is. Really solid. I think it's their most successful sort of entry into rock, sort of stadium rock. But there's a great video that goes with this album as well. I can't remember what it's called, Tour Film. I put it up there with Stop Making Sense by Talking Heads. But yeah, so this was in Kurt Cobain's top 50 ever albums. R.E.M.'s Green. Fantastic. Next up, the chairman of Chuckles, the Tsar of Fanar, Morrissey. His list is kind of singer-songwriters, a lot of CBGBs, television. No, not television actually. He had Patti Smith's Horses, Ramones, but predictably, he has Sparks, Kimono My House. I'm not a massive fan of Kimono My House. I find it a bit twee. I don't know. I can't get with it. I mean, I love This Town Ain't Big Enough, which I think was a top 5 hit in England when it came out. But I don't know. I can live without this album. I love Number One in Heaven by Sparks. And yeah, this was a copy I bought. What I've noticed, a lot of these records are ones that I bought in the early 90s second hand for about £1. Now, I reckon it's because I was reading the lists in Melody Maker and then going out and rushing out and buying them. And where second hand records were only £1 or £2, I think this cost me about £3 at the time. I don't know if it's got a bit of writing up there, actually. Yeah, so this was in Moz's list, along with Jeff Buckley's Grace, which is a record I'm really starting to love again, Jeff Buckley's Grace. And need to get that on vinyl. But yeah, Kimono My House, one of Moz's picks. Moz's sideman, Johnny Marr. What did he pick? His list was kind of predictable. They all kind of picked the Stooges and the Velvet Underground. But in his list, and this is a bloody great album. I don't know how well known this is or not. This came out, and this is the Velvet Underground, kind of the lost album. This came out in '85, and this was kind of a fairly big deal in the music press in England in '85, because Jesus and Mary Chain had come out with Psycho Candy, and we're talking about the Velvet Underground a lot. And at the same time, this came out, which is the album that would have been between the Velvet Underground self-titled third album, or eponymous third album, and the last album. And I've got to say, on some day, they found the tapes. How does this happen? They found the tapes of the album and brought it out. There are and sadly they put some sort of modern production values on it, but only on a couple of tracks. Side 1, I might argue, is one of the best sides, maybe the best Velvet Underground side. I Can't Stand It. Stephanie says She's My Best Friend. Lisa says Ocean. Side 2 opens with Foggy Notion as well, which might be my favourite ever Velvet Underground record. This is a fantastic album. I don't know how easy it is to find now, but it's the Velvet Underground VU. Discovered in about 83, brought out in 85. Johnny Marr had it on his list as his favourite ever record. I've got to say, I'm with him. I think it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I used to have that T-shirt when I was young. I didn't know anything about the Velvet Underground. I used to just stare at that picture and just think, what are they about? It was that was the beauty of music before the internet, innit? The mystery was still there. Yeah, so Velvet Underground, VU, the Lost Album. That was in Johnny Marr's top 10. Next up, John Lydon, Sex Pistols. John Lydon, very incredibly wide taste in music. He likes reggae. He loves the edgier side of progressive rock. Doesn't really like punk. The closest he came to, I found his list and cross-referenced it a few times, and these two records came up all the time. The Raincoats, who were a female sort of post-punk band. I saw Nick Vinyl Butty talking about this. So I was watching a stream the next day, actually. I never get time to watch streams live. Ranking the Obscure stream. He does it 8 o'clock Thursday. It's very good. It's a really good stream, actually. It's quite enjoyable. And how do you describe it? Imagine an episode of Last of the Summer Wine where the focus isn't on Nora Batty stockings, but instead on UK post-punk. That's kind of the theme of the stream, really, a lot of the time. But it's brilliant. But they were talking about the Raincoats, and hard to describe the Raincoats. Kind of post-punk, all female, kind of like the flip side to the Slits, kind of very lo-fi. They literally they were learning their instruments as they went. A big influence on sort of jangle pop, I suppose. But yeah, the Raincoats was in John Lydon's list of top 10 ever records, as well as Roxy Music. Fantastic record this, For Your Pleasure. And he particularly picked out the song, and I'm really glad he did, because I've mentioned this song, which I love, which is In Every Dream Home a Heartache, which is, you can kind of see why Johnny Lydon loved that record, because it's kind of a critique of opulence, or sort of that horrific middle classness that only seems to exist in England, which is really what punk was, wasn't it? It was kind of a class war. It was based on class a lot of time, you know. And the Queen is dead, and Every Dream Home a Heartache it really is a fantastic dismantling of that kind of everything's all right on the outside, everything's screwed in the inside. It's kind of, you know, a guy who's obsessed by a rubber sex doll, and a fantastic song, Every Dream Home a Heartache. But yeah, this was in Johnny Lydon's top 10 ever records, and it is a great record. It's fantastic. I mean, the first 5 Roxy are absolutely amazing, aren't they? But yeah. So next up, David Bowie. That's my David Bowie impression. David Bowie, he did a list in Vanity Fair in 2003 of his, I think, 25 favourite ever records, and it's kind of what you'd expect. A lot of Velvet Underground, Ramones, I think, were in there. But he picked out, and I'm glad he picked this out, because I've shown this, Linton Kwesi Johnson's Forces for Victory, which is a UK... Well, Linton Kwesi Johnson came over to the UK when he was very young. And this is like a reggae album where he's kind of singing, talking over it. Fantastic instrumentation on this. Maybe the great song on here is Fight Them Back. I mean, they're all brilliant, but Fight Them Back. I mean, basically, it's an evocation of what it was like growing up in Britain or London, black, in the 70s, which I know wasn't a lot of fun. And it's a fantastic album, this. And yeah, Bowie picked it in his top 25 records ever, along with Shipbuilding by Robert Wyatt. He chose the single, which I agree with. I've got it on 12-inch. I love. It was an Elvis Costello song, anti-war song, probably the greatest anti-war song ever. It was the Falklands War, which was in '82. An amazing tune. Better than Elvis Costello, but Elvis Costello's is good as well. It's got Chet Baker on it. But yeah, Bowie picked Robert Wyatt's Shipbuilding. So yeah, fantastic choice. So in terms of who I saw those pictures of, Jimi Hendrix. Now, reading about Hendrix was interesting. There's a huge list. If you put in Jimi Hendrix favourite ever records albums, he's got a fantastic selection. 50. He lived in London before he was famous, and he used to wander over to HMV in Oxford Street. Apparently, I was reading, and just almost used to pick records at random. And he apparently had a penny on his stylus. And he used to blow the speakers out as well. And because he played everything so loud, the stylus would hop. So one of the he used records he loved was Holst Planet Suite, apparently, which kind of makes sense. You can believe that. He used to go to HMV and just pick out a load of classical stuff, and this was one he played all the time, apparently. Also, he loved Volume 2 by Little Richard, which I've got to say is the absolute. This is the fulcrum of music, isn't it? Volume 2, but all the first album, everything in modern music comes from Little Richard, and heavy metal, rock, pop. He was the man. I mean, Lemmy loved Little Richard. I remember him saying he was saying like if he must have been pretty tough, because if you were black, gay, and living in Macon, Georgia in 1940, you must have had to be pretty streetwise. This is incredible. Starts off with Keep a Knockin', which I was listening to, and I thought that intro to Keep a Knockin' is the exact same as Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. It's the exact same. So Led Zeppelin must have been huge fans, I imagine. It's got The Girl Can't Help It, Lucille. I mean, I could listen to Lucille all day. But this is probably the Little Richard album, I think. It's fantastic, this. And yeah, huge fan of Little Richard. But also, Hendrix was a big fan of the Bee Gees' second album called First, because he was obsessed by the harmonies, apparently. He used to play this constantly. He loved it. And I've got to say, I've said on a couple of videos that I love this album as well. I think it's fantastic. So, and he's got to love. I kind of like the idea of Hendrix being off his tits, listening to Love Somebody on in London. But yeah, good times. But yeah, Hendrix loved the Bee Gees first. But his list is well worth checking out. It's brilliant. So what did Ian McCulloch go for? Echo and the Bunnymen. Well, his list is pretty predictable, and again, it's the Velvet Underground, it's the television. But he picked ABBA Gold. Came out in '92, the 10 years after they split, and it sold 31 million copies now. This unbelievable, isn't it? I don't think America appreciates how huge ABBA were. They kind of dwarfed the Beatles in a way, didn't they, in England? But I am an ABBA greatest hits aficionado. So I've got the singles here, not as good. If you are an ABBA aficionado, the hit selection you want to go for is ABBA Greatest Hits Volume 2. This is the one. This is the peak. This is the peak era, and it does contain Dave Grohl's favourite ever ABBA song, Eagle. Fantastic tune, Eagle. But yeah, ABBA Greatest Hits Volume 2 still available for 99 pence everywhere in the UK. But yeah, well worth picking up. Speaking of Dave Grohl, I looked at his Rebellious Jukebox from May '97. I've got an issue with it. It's all written down. It's in the police pad. Dave Grohl, May '97. Oh, I haven't picked a Husker Du album. That's unforgivable. If I had to pick one, it will be Zen Arcade. This is a triple album. They recorded in 48 hours. Now, call me old-fashioned, but if you're going to call a record one of your favourite ever, surely a prerequisite of that would be knowing how many discs are in the record. Triple album, says Dave. Let's have a look. Let's count them. There's one. There's one. There's two. Yeah. There doesn't appear to be any others in there, Dave. I don't know if he got a special edition or he's just hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. But no, Dave went for Husker Du Zen Arcade, which is a great album. It would be down at about number 4 or 5 for me in the Husker Du list. But yeah, but come on, Dave, you absolute plank. Try and get the number of records right. Husker Du Zen Arcade, that was in Dave Grohl's list. One thing about doing this, you notice the people on sort of the Mount Rockmore of music, like your Lennons, McCartneys, and in this case, Brian Wilson's, their lists are really boring, but they're probably too busy, I imagine. So, Brian Wilson's done a list. I've double-checked it. It's pretty consistent all the way around, quite boring. He's picked 2 of his own albums. Which 2 albums has Brian Wilson picked of his own? First one, Friends. I love Friends. We're entering the Brian Wilson in a nappy in the Sandbox era. Fantastic Friends. It's probably the most consistent Beach Boys record. Not the best. I mean, my favourite would be Surf's Up. But yeah, it's a great album. It's only about 26 minutes. It's like the Beach Boys unplugged. Fantastic. And yeah, it's a pretty wonderful album. So I want to listen to it about 1 a.m. What's the other record he's picked? Let's have a look. He's only gone and picked Wild Honey. by the Beach Boys. Their kind of blue-eyed soul album, which I've got to say I do love. It's about a 25-minute album. It's kind of lo-fi again. It's blue-eyed soul. It's got Darling on it, which is probably my favourite ever Beach Boys track. It's absolutely wonderful. But yeah, Brian Wilson, he's got 10 albums to pick. He's picked 2 of his own, and he's picked Wild Honey and Friends. And yeah, good picks, Brian. But I might have gone for Surf's Up. Brian Eno, what's he picked? His list was pretty predictable. A lot of left field nonsense that I've never heard of. Men pushing fridges downstairs. But he picked Fresh by Sly and the Family Stone, which he said he heard. And he heard the song In Time, which uses drum machines and sounds like it's going to fall apart any minute. And that was the attraction for him, which you can kind of understand. Because obviously then with things like the second side of Low, which he pretty much is his album, or his side on David Bowie's Low, a lot of drum machines, stuff like that. Yeah, so he picked... I've got to say, this is a great album, Fresh. Wonderful. Wonderful album. It's my favourite Sly Stone album. I don't really like There's a Riot Going On. I don't know why. Then this also contains If You Want Me to Stay, which I think is their greatest ever song, and was done by covered by the Red Hot Chili Peppers on Freaky Styley, and they don't make a bad job of it actually. That album was produced by George Clinton, but yeah, Fresh by Sly and the Family Stone. That was in Brian Eno's top 15. Prince is a hard one because I've actually had to do research for this video. He doesn't listen to a lot of other people's records. He only really listens to his own. But I found an article in the Rolling Stone, 1985, and he says, one of the only records I can listen to back to front without skipping is Joni Mitchell's Hissin' of Summer Lawns, which I kind of get. It's got the fantastic jungle line, which is quite experimental. That might have been the attraction for Prince. Plus, there's a lot of keyboards. It's kind of pushing the edges of normal pop, which might, that might have been the appeal for Prince, because that's kind of when he was at his best. If I was your girlfriend, or when Doves Cry, sort of taking pop and just pushing it a little bit. But yeah, Prince's favourite record, certainly in '85, was was Hissin' of Summer Lawns by Joni Mitchell. And Bjork, what did Bjork like? Well, Bjork had a good list, but she picked Salt by the Associates, which kind of totally makes sense. Experimental, operatic vocals, incredible album. Salt. One of my first records that absolutely blew my head off when I was a little nipper was Party Fears 2, which is incredible song, incredible album, incredible story behind the making of this album. And this was Bjork's pick. Superb album. So there's some of my favourite records by some of my favourite artists. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it. Loads of views on my last video, so it's really nice. Thank you so much, and always nice comments. And I'm sure there'll be more videos soon. Thank you.